Welcome back to GSC. The 520,000 mile 7.3 is alive, it's together, so I'm going to clean it up and get ready to do a test drive. So we're going to talk about what needs to happen to get down to the plugs on the injector. Passenger intercooler pipe is out. Well, they're out, clean them because it's worth it. These ones are kind of gooped up. I took the oil fill spout off the valve cover. It just threads out. And then you can set it out of the way. I put the cap back in the valve cover to make sure nothing debris-wise gets in there. So, as you can see, I've got the plug undone right now on the passenger valve cover. And I'm going to try to ohm this out. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to film it quite yet. So I'll probably film that side, drivers, while I wait for the camera to charge up. But this will at least give me an idea of how out of spec they are and what I should expect to find underneath the valve cover. I decided to push through and keep working in the rain. So you can take the breather off that valve cover. It's 2 Phillips screws. Take the valve cover off. It is multiple 13mm heads. Underneath, the harness was completely unplugged, as I kind of expected it to be. So what I might do here is just put the key in it and see if the truck starts and idles on 8. If it does, then I need to go get me a valve cover harness for this driver's side to start with. Oh yeah. Now that's a 7.3 if I ever heard. Beautiful. All right. It was that harness that was unplugged. So now I know. Replace that driver's side harness quick, and then we should be able to go for a test drive. That's our IDM code 1316 troubleshoot here at GSC. Well, on this rainy episode of GSC, it's apart, and it's the driver's bank. While I wait for the camera to charge, put a tripod somewhere, probably in the airbox to watch. That plug right there is our current issue. The valve cover harness goes through the valve cover there. There's a female to female adapter, and I'm pretty sure that since this is the bank on the passenger side that I'm having the dead cylinders from, this is our main issue. But I'd also like to do the one on the driver's side as well, which is a little more difficult to see because the intake. So while I wait for the camera to charge up, I figured I'd give a walk through. Your cold air pipe here has to come out for your intercooler. Intercooler pipe on this side has to be removed, and the air intake has to be removed to do the driver's side. They're 11mm deep wells, which allow you to undo your first clamp here and your clamps down below. So I may go ahead and pop this pipe off quick before we start ohming out our plug to make it a little easier to access. Alright, so we've got quite a bit done here. I already checked the valve cover on the other side and found out that I have power where I need to have power. So my plan is going to take this plug here back off, which is a 10mm nut driver. It'll actually back itself out like so, and then I can split the main harness again. I have 2 bolts in the valve cover here and here, and the truck ran last night just so I could hear it on all 8. So my plan right now is to go ahead and take that back off, take the valve cover off, and then explain what I'm going to do when I probe out the power here on the valve cover harness. I'm going to see if I've got some lights in the garage to light this thing up so we can actually see what I'm talking about. So we've got the valve cover still on, and I wanted to know, was the valve cover harness the problem? So what I did is I ground it out, picked the alternator, and I ohmed out my pins. They're kind of hard to feel. If you can hear the beep of the meter, I have resistance. Like I said, they're hard to get to. Ford has a nice little spec sheet they put out, but by ohming out those plugs, it gives you the opportunity to find out if you have no resistance across all of them, or you have an absolute abundance of resistance. It it pretty much will show you where your bad plug is. In my case, this one kind of showed itself pretty quickly, and it wasn't too bad to diagnose. The passenger side's a little harder because there's not a whole lot of room to get to everything. So I'm going to take this valve cover back off quick, and that way we can get inside here and show you what we've got. Alright, valve cover's up and out. So down inside, you could see, here's our harness, and this was actually unplugged. So there's a plastic detent right here that holds it all together. As you can see, this one kind of flops around a little bit, but it's actually pretty tight. So yeah, if I pull back on it, it's not releasing, which means that this isn't in bad shape. Looking at the injector harness, I was told it was replaced at one point in time, but they didn't replace the valve cover gaskets, which I found kind of unusual, but who am I to judge? We all do things we got to do to keep our truck on the road. So this is what comes unplugged, and if you are checking your resistance and you see 1.0, 1.5 ohms or greater, even greater than 0.7, you can pretty much guarantee that this is undone. In my case, it was completely unplugged and basically just floating over here. So instead of me trying to continue fighting with it, I went ahead and plugged it back in. What you can do too is plug your top back in and make sure that it seats before you get crazy putting it back together. Looking inside this engine, it's actually in pretty good shape, so I don't know that I'm going to complain too much. The injector drivers look good, so I already ohmed everything out. Injectors are still well within spec, so I'm going to go ahead and get this valve cover back on. If you've got a, like I said, IDM code 1316, a lot of times it's this connector here, because it's basically just a female to female connector, or male to male, depending on how you're looking at it. It goes through your valve cover. This holds tight, this holds tight. This is your injector side, this is your truck harness side, and as you can see here, it's kind of in an oily, dirty place. So instead of risking it and not knowing how to troubleshoot it, you can go ahead and take your truck if you've got that code and, like I said, ohm out these plugs, and that way you can tell what you got going on, and then you can make your decision as to whether or not you want to do valve cover gaskets or how you want to approach the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and work on getting this valve cover back on little by little here, and once it's all back on, then I hope to start the truck up and take it for a test drive, because I actually have not driven the truck yet since we brought it home, because it would only do about 21 miles an hour due to the harness being unplugged and only running on basically 5 cylinders, because it had just enough contact that one injector driver was getting a little bit of juice. So go ahead and clean up this valve cover a little bit and slide it back into its home. There are 2 studs that go in the front 2 holes, bolts go in the rest, in case you were wondering. Alright. Can at least read the warning label now, so I guess that's clean enough for me. It should say, warning, GSC works on GM trucks. This is not your typical thing. Alright, so your first little short bolt goes back here. Stud 1 goes here because it holds a bracket that goes on the valve cover, which holds your master harness in place. Bolt 2 goes in this slot here, or stud 2 rather. So I'm going to do this and I will fast forward the video, and that way you guys don't have to sit here and be bored out of your skull while I reassemble this thing. Your breather does have to come off the valve cover, just in case you're wondering how to get that last valve cover bolt out. That is the way. more to do, and it goes way in the very back, and it is really hard to get to because it sits that's fun when your mic gets tangled up. Sits way back there by the firewall. So that's my least favorite one to do up to this point. The rest of them aren't too bad because you can pretty much just do a thread in cycle with your little whiz bang and they'll zip right down. Alright, so I will crawl up the engine bay, get that very back one tightened down that goes towards the firewall, and that way I can show you guys what that's going to look like. I'll do a light quarter turn on these, since I have a feeling that this valve cover will come back off in the future when I do glow plugs. So I should have done it all in one, but I decided against it because I have 0 miles on the truck and I kind of want to take it for a test drive and see how it operates before I spend the money on glow plugs and everything else I'm going to need. So your breather here for the valve cover, there are little grommets on the bottom of it, if you can see them, and they just pop right on like so. These ones are pretty womped out, so we're going to see if I can get those to pop back in that valve cover without making a total mess. Alright, could have been worse. It's in. Now the fun part, getting the screws lined up. That one feels pretty good. Get yourself a very stubby Phillips screwdriver, because that way you can get around the firewall, put these back in. The last thing you want to do is be stuck hitting a cowl every time you try to turn that. There's your valve cover breather, that's on. I may take it off and check on that gasket, but it looks like it's seated. And then here's our bracket that I mentioned earlier that goes on the valve cover here. And it is what holds that main harness in place. So I had to lift that up a little bit, get the studs to align if they want to. There we go. Alright, that's on, it's in place. So this just slides up like so, and there's a track. There's your main harness. Put your nuts on your studs here. So that allows me to put the main harness back together here. Kind of shimmy it. Here's our 10mm nut driver that we had earlier. Get us under the truck now. So I'll retrieve tools, do that final valve cover bolt in the back, and then try to do a test fire. So the final valve cover bolts back in. The breather is on, main harness is plugged in, valve cover harness is good. We're in pretty good shape here. There's no tools or anything that could possibly find their way into the engine bay. So I think it's time to do a test fire and make sure that our valve cover harness troubleshooting is accurate. So grab the keys here. We'll see what happens with this thing. It's either going to start right up or it's not. 50-50. Starts right up. Alright, well, I guess that now that I've got it going, I should go ahead and get the intercooler pipes back in, let it warm up, get 5 gallons of diesel in it, and take it out for its very first drive. So now we know how to troubleshoot a 7.3 that has a crank no start, and especially one that has the P1316 IDM fault code. Check your valve cover harnesses, check your injector driver harnesses, and hopefully the next video you guys see is me taking this for a test drive. Thanks all. One more quick video. It's all reassembled. It is running. It is ready to drive. Pretty impressed with 520,000 miles on it. I love that. All right, we'll catch you guys next time. All right, well, we're gonna see what happens here. Even if I just take it around the block. 7.3 is in motion for the first time on 8 cylinders since I brought it home. Probably doesn't know what to do with itself right now, considering it's run on 5 cylinders for who knows how long before I got it, because they only putzed it around the industrial part where they had it. I do have a boost leak, so I must not have one of the clamps tight. That's okay. One of the fact it's throwing off the shifts. Brakes feel good, steering feels good. Tires are definitely low. It feels like I'm riding in a boat right now. If boats had Ford Motor Company stamped on the front of them. I think the last time they did that was D-Day. Oh yeah, love that boost leak. buying a tail shaft speed sensor too, because it definitely is not a big fan of staying locked up. Either that or it's the coolant temp sensor telling it to unlock the torque converter because the engine thinks it's too cold. All my gauges work. They say they are they're reading like they should actually, so might just be unplugged, might be pouty, could be dirty. Definitely gonna have to go home and fix that boost thing. That's not gonna fix itself. Rides pretty decently. Everything feels pretty good. Like I said, steering's getting tight, brakes feel fine. It's kind of cool to be driving it on 8 instead of 5. Now we know the 7.3 is under its own power. Get these boost leaks fixed and try again later. Thanks, guys.